Well, so the events over this weekend, specifically the events yesterday, the attempt on the life of former President Donald Trump, this really reveals to us just how devolved things have become in 2024. The degree to which civility has exited the stage, and we are down to, well, pulling all the stops at it seems in terms of just the general state of society. But I want to talk today about how really we all dodged a huge bullet yesterday. Of course, Donald Trump dodging a physical bullet, but America and the American economy and the dollar, especially, I think really dodged a huge bullet yesterday, and we should really all be very thankful for that because we were inches away from this country being plunged into an incredible level of turmoil, the likes of which I don't think exists in living memory. Now, thankfully, that was averted. The president, former president Donald Trump, survived that attack, but we're not out of the woods yet. So let's just delve into this. There's plenty of things to talk about, and feel free to chime in on the chat. I see some regular people there saying hello, welcome to the live stream. This is, of course, a very divisive, a very controversial issue, but there are some things that we can kind of say unequivocally about it. Some things there's going to be a lot of speculation. Who's behind it? I mean, that first of all is probably a question that we'll never know the answer to 100%. Plenty of theories floating around out there, of course. Could it have been, I've heard everything from a false flag on the part of Trump, trying to drum up support. And certainly, one thing that you can say is that this has created a tremendous amount of support for the former president. But it's kind of interesting, you see those rumors floating around that this is some kind of false flag. I heard that, maybe he wasn't even shot in the ear. He was cut by a piece of glass. I don't put a lot of weight in these theories, but it just goes to show you that people are going to speculate about anything. Of course, kind of interesting that the folks who normally are the first to jump to the conclusion that it's a false flag are those who will probably deny this the most vehemently. But that seems unlikely. Perhaps the deep state, the globalists, have sunk to the level of trying to orchestrate an attack on the former president, get him out of the picture. I'm trying to stay as unbiased here in this commentary as possible, but if that's the case, well, then certainly, probably we're not out of the clear yet because the election is still a long way away, right? So if there's some kind of a conspiracy to physically harm Donald Trump, get him out of the election, then that could still be something that could play out, unfortunately. And there's a lot of kind of just sick, I think, individuals out there who are looking at this and saying, that they hoped that it had been carried out to its completion. Things on Twitter or X trending like, one job or, uh, you know, uh, how did you miss that sort of thing. And those people, one, it's kind of a sick sentiment to begin with, hoping that somebody is physically harmed. But more importantly, I think they're really missing the potential consequences of how this could have taken place, or what would have transpired should this had been successful. And certainly, the dollar, the U.S. economy would have suffered an enormous blow because clearly, in my mind at least, had this attack been successful, had Donald Trump, been seriously injured or killed potentially, that would have led to massive civil disorder within the United States. I read a piece by Ray Dalio recently in Time where he says that he now believes the possibility of a U.S. civil war is greater than 50%. Now, that's a pretty sobering revelation from somebody as intelligent and successful, and somebody that whose analysis we should take seriously as Ray Dalio. But should this attack or had this attack taken place and been successful, I think that right off the bat you would have seen a huge amount of turmoil in the U.S., perhaps the beginning of a civil war type conflict. And that's a scary thing to contemplate. But you've got to understand from an economic standpoint the kind of risk that that introduces into this equation, right? Um, should the U.S. election become tainted by something like violence or coercion, something so obvious as an assassination attempt, I mean, how would that affect the view of the rest of the world of the U.S. economy, of the U.S. Dollar as a stable reserve currency, as the how would it have affected their perception of U.S. debt? All of these things, would come into play very rapidly. I'm sure by Monday morning we would see a huge financial event had this taken place. I mean, thankfully it took place on a Saturday, right? It's odd how that works, but these events always seem to take place when the markets are closed. I've noticed that certainly. I'm sure that all of you have noticed that these major events that are transpiring always seem to take place while the markets are closed. But can you imagine if this had occurred on a weekday when markets are trading? I mean, you could have seen a huge sell-off in financial assets, could have seen a lot of action in the debt market. Fortunately, that wasn't the case. I mean, I think that this thing worked out about as well as we could possibly hope for under the circumstances. But for the people hoping that this would have somehow, been successful and that that would have improved the situation, I think that that's a pipe dream, and that, there's a huge element of risk here that people aren't really taking into account. Sorry if the volume's low. I'm using a new microphone, but I'll have to troubleshoot that later because I don't think I can really do that right now. Sometimes people say volume is low in these videos, and then I go back and watch them after the fact, and the volume's fine. So maybe just crank up the volume there if that's a problem. Um, this is interesting. Again, like I said, the former president's level of support following this attack has ticked up notably on betting website Predict It. You can see that that's following the attack. Nice little tick up in his probability of being the next president. Also, the term "donate to Trump" on Google Trends also getting a significant amount of traffic. So, look, I mean, if this thing wasn't a false flag put on by the Trump campaign, as crazy as that sounds, I don't think that's the case. By the way, um, I suspect that likely than not, this is just a deranged individual. Just kind of applying Occam's razor here. That seems to be the simplest explanation. But who knows? Again, we'll probably never know the answer to that 100%. But the thing that is clear is that we just narrowly avoided a major market crash and big problem for the dollar. Maybe that would be the least of the problems, considering the fact that a civil war, civil disorder on some scale. I'm not saying that it's going to be like trench warfare tomorrow, but you understand there could be civil unrest, there could be disruptions to basic services, riot in the streets, pandemonium. Who knows? I mean, would the election even take place had this attack been successful? I think that's a valid question to ask. And there is historical precedent for this. You can look back to World War One, where an assassination, Archduke Ferdinand, destabilized all of Europe. One man killed, and arguably in the political realm of 1914, Archduke Ferdinand was a less important individual than Donald Trump is in today's environment. So, I mean, this could have been certainly enough to trigger, who knows, major civil war, the advent of World War III. I don't really know, but you do have to consider, who was behind this. Like I said, maybe a deranged individual, possibly. It could have been foreign actors, right? Our opponents on the geopolitical chessboard certainly would love to sow division and disorder within the U.S. So, could it have been Russian or Chinese actors behind this? I mean, that's not something we can rule out. And if that's the case, again, we're not really in the clear yet because we dodged this bullet, but who knows what else is coming down the pipe. And between now and November, there's a real potential for major black swan events. Now, this is sort of the definition of a black swan, what took place on Saturday, right? Now, we kind of avoided the actual black swan scenario, although we're going to have to see how this plays out because, this was something that certainly I don't think it could have been predicted with any specificity. And again, Donald Trump was fine physically. He narrowly avoided, being shot, it appears. But Had that not been the case, this would have been, the black swan of black swans for at least, this decade, I would think. Again, that didn't happen, but all of this should serve as a warning to us. I see some folks in the chat saying, was this a staged event, false flag? I mean, again, maybe, right? There's all sorts of angles you can speculate about this. I don't think we'll ever know, but you can run through the exercise to think if this had gone differently, what would the fallout have been? I think that's important because we're not guaranteed to have peace and calm between now and the election in November. And so these are things that you can't really predict. But one thing that we do know is that the US dollar, the US economy is very fragile at the moment, I think is a good way to say it. We're running out of buyers internationally for US dollar denominated debt. China, one of the biggest holders, is dumping their debt. We've got, rumors of the petrodollar coming to an end. Aside from those rumors, there's also the, fact that the petrodollar is being, taken apart day by day, cut by cut, with the sale of petrochemicals, petroleum, natural gas in non-dollar denominated currencies. You've got a situation where a record amount of sanctions and weaponization of the dollar have decreased its appeal significantly around the world. And should we see some major disruption to the US political process, that's going to sow a lot more distrust of the dollar around the world, or a lot less confidence, let's say. And I think that that's correct, that assessment, that should the political process here, should the rule of law be disrupted, should there be civil disorder, the dollar will not be as reliable as a world reserve currency. And look, yeah, some people. I know there's a lot of speculation in the chat. Some people saying it's obviously a staged event. Well, nothing about this seems obvious to me. But look, I mean, again, you can speculate about it. It doesn't make much difference at the end of the day who was behind this. From our standpoint, what you really need to focus on here is getting prepared, right? Just condition yourself to understand that this is not going to be like a normal election year, right? This is not going to be like elections you've witnessed in the past. This is the first attempt on the life of a president or presidential candidate or former president since 1981. So clearly things are changing here. And I mean, the signs of this have been everywhere. We've talked about this extensively on this channel, but we're getting confirmation of that. And I think it's time, if you're watching this, to just take heed and get prepared. If you are someone who is considering getting out of dollar denominated assets, getting out of paper assets, or at least converting some of your money into physical gold, physical silver, make sure you check out today's video sponsor, sdbullion.com. You can go to sdbullion.com/new. If you're a new customer, you can get some gold or silver at spot on your first order. That's where I buy my gold and silver. So, check them out. Not financial advice, not telling anybody to do anything specific, but I'm telling you what I'm doing in light of this continuing situation that just continues to devolve in front of our very eyes. And, look, I mean, anything can happen at any point. We're heading towards an election where you've got deep fakes, you've got AI, you've got an assassination attempt, you've got de-dollarization, you've got some major wars developing around the world, and the outcome of those and the degree to which we are involved in those, one way or the other, is going to be dependent on the outcome of this election. Now, one other thing I will say is that following this event, following the debate that we had recently, following this attempt yesterday, it's looking more and more like Donald Trump is going to win the presidency in November. Now, I try not to get political on this channel. I try to stay unbiased. Trump is perhaps the better option economically than Biden, but Biden's not really setting the bar too high there. So this is not like an endorsement of Donald Trump. But one thing that we do need to consider now is that it's becoming more and more likely he's going to be the next president. And should that happen, we will see a continuation of the inflation trend. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean the economy is going to be worse than it is right now. In a lot of ways, I believe Trump's policy is going to be very stimulative. It's talking about ending the income tax. I mean, if he could pull it off, that would be pretty amazing. He's talking about ending payroll taxes. If he can pull that off, that'd be pretty amazing for the poor and middle class. But I mean, he's going to be cutting taxes across the board, right? He's going to be cutting corporate taxes. It's going to be good for the stock market. You're going to see a big increase in paper assets. So, we've been getting record high after record high after record high in the stock market. When the Federal Reserve starts cutting, and you got Donald Trump in the presidency slashing taxes and not cutting spending, I mean, I don't think he's going to do much to impact the deficit. He is going to shift the tax structure here, though, significantly. It's going to be very stimulative. And so you're going to see, I think, inflation continue to rise. You're going to see asset valuation continue to soar in a huge way. You're going to see the valuations of tech stocks, the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, housing is going to continue to become more expensive. I mean, with lower rates, with everything that's going on with the dollar and the global economy and the perception of the dollar, when the Fed starts cutting rates, which is probably coming, no later than September. I mean, time will tell, right? Things can happen between now and then, but they're going to be cutting. The deficit is going to continue to expand. Very likely, deficit could even be even bigger under Trump because, again, he's going to be cutting taxes, stimulative, inflationary, but maintaining large spending programs. Because look, the guy's, he's not a libertarian economist. He's not a Austrian economist. He's sort of a populist in terms of his policies, and you can like that or dislike it, but the reality is that the dollar is going to continue to lose its value here, and very likely asset valuations are going to spike. So, get prepared. Does that mean you want to own nothing but physical gold and silver? No, but I will tell you this: if this event had occurred yesterday had been successful, then you would definitely want to have some hard assets backing up your portfolio, if you ask me, because as strange as things are becoming, you just need some protection, right, against uncertainty. And clearly, if yesterday is any example, we are in for a huge amount of uncertainty. And it seems like the only thing we can really be certain of is that inflation is going to continue, the debts and deficits are going to continue, and the de-dollarization trend around the world may continue as well. It makes sense when you consider that we're running, enormous deficits. Nations around the world are less and less interested in dollars and dollar-denominated debt, and nobody has got a different playbook. There's sort of variations on this playbook, but they all involve huge deficit spending and dollar devaluation. So, you might prefer one version of that to the other, but you got to understand that neither one means that the dollar is going to be, in absolute terms, appreciating anytime soon. And when the Fed starts cutting rates, I mean, I do think that we will see new all-time highs for gold and for silver. Gold is sitting just under record all-time highs. I mean, if you looked at the gold chart lately, this is the all-time high for the price of gold. Now, I know last week I had forecast that we might see a breakout in the price of gold and silver following the release of the inflation data. We kind of did see that, but then we got on Friday, we got the hot PPI data, which kind of threw a little bit of water on that party there. But still, I mean, the all-time high for gold is right around, 2450. We're at 2412 right now. So we are just a little over 1% away from record all-time highs. Silver, you look at the chart for silver, still in a significant uptrend. We just broke out of that bull flag. Now, again, the PPI data came out on Friday, kind of threw a little cold water on the rally, but still we're in an uptrend. And I think it's a good time to, get into these markets, get into some physical assets. Again, I'm not telling you what to do with your money. I'm not giving you financial advice. It's just you observe the trends and you observe the charts and you kind of, surmise what to do from there. But I don't think it's looking good for the dollar. It is looking good for the precious metals, and they're still very cheap. One other event that I'd like to mention that I think we should look out for is later this month, the PCE data is going to be released. That is the Fed's preferred inflation metric. Now, that is going to be coming out, I think, on the 26th, is what I saw. So the FOMC meeting this month, there's a FOMC meeting that's coming up on July 31st. The PCE data is what the Fed calls its preferred inflation measure. It's the one they pay the most attention to. It's going to be well under 3% by all forecasts. I think it's going to be about 2.6% if the numbers come in along with expectations. But we just had Fed Powell in congressional testimony. He told us that he's not going to start cutting, or rather that they don't need to see inflation coming back to 2% before he starts cutting. So he thinks that, if we wait until inflation is at 2%, you could be waiting too long because inflation could collapse below that. So that's important because we've got this next inflation print coming out in the 26th, and you got an FOMC meeting just after that. Now, if you look at the CME FedWatch tool, I'll pull it up here real quick. And it's kind of interesting to see, this chart after this weekend. But right now, everybody is anticipating that rate cuts are going to begin in September. Right now, we've got an 88.1% chance of the CME FedWatch tool being priced in of rate cuts at the September Fed meeting. But we have the July meeting before that. Now, right now, they're only factoring a 6.7% chance of a 25 basis point rate cut. That could change with the release of that PCE data. Just something to keep an eye out on. It's not a guarantee or anything like that, but say you get a low PCE print on July 26th, there is a significant possibility that, the possibility of a rate cut at the July meeting could increase. Now, if we get a surprise rate cut, right now, again, only priced in at about 6.7%, so low probability right now. But if we get a decline in the PCE index, maybe we get some other events between now and the end of the month, there's a real possibility that you could see a surprise rate cut in July. And, why is the Fed going to do this? Well, there's a brewing crisis in the banking sector. Consumers are under a huge amount of pressure. It's an election year. So, if they're willing to try to shoot somebody, they're probably willing to manipulate interest rates to affect the outcome of the election. So these are all things to think about. And, I see some people in the chat here saying rate cuts not going to happen. Well, rate cuts have to happen. Rate cuts will definitely happen. I don't know when exactly. Right now, it's looking like in September. But what you also have to consider is that if this is what everybody's looking at right now, and everybody's factoring in a 6.7% chance in July of rate cuts, if we actually get a rate cut, it's not being priced in. So the price reaction of markets and of precious metals as well will be disproportionate. It'll be massive. Probably see gold take out 2,500, 2,600, 2,700. Yes, I am aware that, in the past they forecast rate cuts that didn't take place. Sure. But that doesn't mean anything, right? The bottom line is that at current interest rates, the U.S. economy is falling apart. Now, if the Fed really wanted to fight inflation, probably what they should be doing right now is raising rates, because you're still seeing massive deficit spending. You're still seeing, credit card debt expanding to record all-time highs. So if you really want to rein in inflation, you have to reduce the expansion of credit. But that's not going to happen, because that would collapse the entire economy. And we've already seen regional banks, they're sitting on $500 billion of losses as a result of higher interest rates, because the treasuries that they own and the commercial real estate that backs up their portfolios of loans, it's lost a lot of value because of higher rates. So yeah, they have to cut. They're definitely going to cut. It's just a matter of when. I think that they need a crisis. They need some political cover. Now, lowering inflation or declining inflation numbers. And look, I understand that inflation isn't really coming down. I go to the grocery store too. I'm not saying that. It's just that the official numbers presented by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, that's what the Fed looks at, right? They look at the CPI, they look at the PCE to make their choices. Now, maybe they're deliberately making those come in lower so that they have cover to cut. I'm not saying that they're valid numbers. The official inflation numbers are completely cooked, but they're still important because they are what the Fed references, right? So if you do see an emergency rate cut, I wouldn't be surprised if we see silver hit 35 bucks, gold hit 2,500, on its way to 2,700. That's not necessarily going to happen. It's a low probability, but you kind of look at the risk reward there. I'm telling you, I'm perfectly happy sitting on some physical metal. This stuff's all long term anyway. I have no plans on selling that, even if gold does hit 2,700 or silver does hit 35 bucks. I mean, it'll be nice, I guess. Downside is that stacking will then cost more. Um, but I do have some paper silver positions, miners and such, that I would consider unloading if we saw a big spike up in the price of gold and silver. But rate cuts are coming. And when they do, we're going to see much higher prices for gold and silver. We're going to see a decline in the absolute value of the dollar, I believe. And yesterday, I think we were given clear evidence that the possibility of a major crisis is there. It's lurking around the corner at any moment. And that's kind of what the Fed needs to get in there and start monetizing debt again. So, look, it's a good thing that yesterday went the way it did, I think, for the US economy and for the dollar, but it's just evidence that we are skating on thin ice here, and that at any moment things can change drastically. And we really lucked out yesterday that they didn't, because the consequences would have been far reaching and terrible, I think, in a lot of ways for especially those of us here in the US. But that didn't happen, but still, we got to get prepared, right? Because we know that the plan is to devalue the dollar. It's probably going to happen a lot faster than they state they want to do it at. And I don't think that the election is really going to have much impact on that, except that given the amount of contention here, there is the possibility for an event that could drastically accelerate that process. So, look, get prepared, keep stacking. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I know this one was kind of rambling and far reaching, but it was an important topic to cover. And, there's going to be fallout from this moving forward. We got to keep an eye on that. There could be retaliation, there could be further attempts. I mean, who knows? But just get prepared and be ready for anything, because anything can happen, as we witnessed yesterday. And, you get these flashbulb moments in life where these major events take place, and I think that we are due for some big ones. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Stay safe and happy stacking, everybody. I will catch you next time. Smart Silver Stacker out.